Okay, friends, we good? We good? We good? We good? No, not yet. Okay. All right. Hey, friends, let me point out something. The things that stir up at night, other than the night terrors, the sleepwalking, and things like that, but other things that actually wake me up at night, and I kid you not, I kid you not about the sleepwalking and the night terrors. Those truly do wake me up. Yes, I do sleepwalk. Yes, I do wake up in different locations of the house, including outside. It's kind of crazy. But, and this is going to sound really goofy, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under any buses, and you're not in trouble. But I have noticed, I'm just saying, I have noticed that a couple of you have yet to look up from your phone this school year. Not throwing anyone under the bus. I get it. I'm not saying I'm not being the freshman teacher that I am, where everyone's putting their phones over there. I'm not that guy. I'm not gonna be that with y'all. But please, 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 I know many of you are doing quite well. We are baby stepping into a lot of stats, and I would hate for somebody to have been focusing on social media, saying, I got all this, and all of a sudden we get into the meat and potatoes of the class. And because you saw 55 TikToks and Kit Kats and Patty Whacks and all the other social media, I would hate for you to have missed out on something. So, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you limit, I mean, not do, but limit the amount of social media that you're involved in? Is that okay? And I kid you not, it does wake me up at night. I wake up going, how can I convey this correctly to kids where they'll be like, and be nice. And I'm just saying, I just, that's just a teacher perspective. Let me get back to the cool dude that I really am. Okay, so I'm on page 18. Still with me? Okay. So this is starting to talk about something called the center and the spread of our data. And we've learned things so far. A circle graph is not going to tell us anything about the spread of our data. We're going to see percentage-wise. A dot plot might. A histogram will. What was the other one called? One that looks like a histogram that's not a histogram? Do what? Bar graph. Oh, you're awesome. Thank you. So a bar graph is not going to help us out with our data either. But what we're going to start focusing on is the shape our data makes. Okay? And there's all kinds of shapes that your data can make. Okay? The one that we are hoping that our data will somewhat look like is something called a normal curve. Okay? And how the normal curve happens is if you were to make your histogram into like an infinite amount of bars. If you made your histogram into an infinite amount of bars, and no, I'm not going to draw an infinite amount of bars because we don't really have time. Though I enjoy spending time with y'all in class, we would just kind of run out of time. But if I were to make a whole bunch of really, really, really skinny bars, we would hope our data would turn into something called a normal curve. Okay? Meaning our information, and I know I talked about this a little bit yesterday, our information falls within one standard deviation or two standard deviations or three standard deviations, bless you, of the mean. Okay? And what was another word for the mean? Expected value. Okay? And I keep repeating that because you're going to start getting away at some point where it'll be like, the expected value is this, and you have to realize that the expected value is referring to the mean. Okay? So we're looking at shapes. Now, the normal curve is roughly like this, and then we have normal curves that could look something like this, something like this. Okay? So those are basically normal curves that you'll deal with, and this is called skew left, Sometimes they call it negative. And this is skew right, which is sometimes called, what do you think? What do you think? Oh, you guys are so smart. Okay? So those are a couple of things. Now, where people that do studies get themselves into trouble is when they collect data and they start realizing that their data isn't going to form a normal curve. Unfortunately, they will start taking out data in order to make their data form a normal curve. Okay? And it sounds like cheating, doesn't it? Now, I'm going to give you another neighborhood story. I'm that guy in the neighborhood. I love my neighborhood. I live kind of by Arapahoe High School, right next to Powell Middle School. Okay? You guys know what I'm kind of talking about? Okay? If you don't know, find the brightest yellow house you could possibly imagine, and that's my house. And I chose it to be that way because I love the colors of my house. I really do. The whole first floor is all red brick. The second floor is the brightest yellow, and then our shutters and our front door are this teal green. I think it looks pretty sharp. And then the trim's white. And I know some of you are like, "Oh my God, that's horrible. I live in an HOA and we have 6 different paint templates to choose from." But it is what it is. We chose that color. We chose not to live in an HOA for a reason. But one thing I do pride with a neighborhood is I live in a neighborhood because I enjoy living amongst families and I enjoy kids. I enjoy kids playing. I think it's great. I think it's so healthy to see kids outside playing. When my daughters, when they were younger, they had a whole bunch of friends. They collected all the kids up and down the street, and they were playing hide and go seek. And not to be the creepy old guy, but I was sitting out on the front porch swing, just enjoying watching the kids play hide and go seek. And they would come running up to me saying, "Hey, is it okay to go hide in this person's yard?" And I was like, "It's okay to hide in anyone's yard until someone comes out and screams at you, and then you egg their house later that night." But I love that. But one thing that I saw living next to Powell Middle School, y'all have heard of some of the discrepancies that have taken place down in Douglas County, the school district. Okay, like I left Douglas County real quick. Okay, I was in there for 9 years. I was at Chaparral High School. I absolutely loved when I first got there. And then they got this school board that wanted to do pay for performance for teachers. They took away large amounts of salary from teachers, made us work way harder on stuff that had nothing to do. So a lot of people here in this school and in this district and surrounding districts have left Douglas County as teachers. When I left Douglas County and I came here, I got a $30,000 pay raise. Okay, so that was pretty cool. I was like, dude, this is great. But because of that, a lot of people opt their kids out of Douglas County schools to go to adjoining school districts. And so Littleton Public Schools, where my kids went, and that's my feeder area, a lot of people from Highlands Ranch will opt their kids into the schools that are closer to the Douglas County, Arapahoe County borders. And so Powell Middle School became a very saturated middle school with a lot of people who would come from Highlands Ranch to drop their kids off. Well, if you come from Mineral into Powell Middle School, you have a flashing school zone. But if you go through the neighborhood, you don't. And every kid that lives on our street and streets that are adjacent to ours, you would always hear kids say, "Oh my gosh, I almost got hit by a car walking to school." Okay. My house is probably 300 steps. So if you were walking to Powell, so I'm pretty close. And my kids have to cross a street called Corona Way in order to, when they were in middle school, they had to cross it. And they'd always say, "I almost got hit by a car." And so because Littleton Public Schools didn't share the same breaks necessarily, spring breaks or fall breaks as us, I started noticing people were really speeding through the neighborhood the back way in so they get their kid to school. And I'm not talking about like, it's supposed to 25 and they're doing 30. I'm talking they're doing like 60 miles an hour. Okay. And it's crazy. So what I had done is I'd contacted Powell Middle School, and a guy I know him as LC. His name's Lawrence Chambers. He's one of the assistant principals at Powell Middle School, and I've known him for years because he used to coach with my former principal at Chaparral, and he'd come to our games and we'd sit around and we would always chat. And so I contacted him. I said, hey LC, can you meet me by the tennis courts, which is on the curve of Corona Way, as you would go in, into the middle school? And he goes, yeah. So he meets me there, and he's watching how fast these cars are flying down Corona Way, which goes along this gulch called Lee Gulch, and he's like, that's crazy. And so he starts trying to figure out the school district's way to try and maybe get that to become a flashing school zone as you come in. And he wasn't getting a whole lot of traction because, Littleton schools, well, we're concerned about all of our schools, and you just have this one neighbor in this neighborhood who's complaining about how fast cars are going. And I got things that were thrown back at me from the school board saying, you chose to live where you chose to live. And I'm like, that's correct. I chose to live there because I thought my kids could ride the school bus to elementary school, they could walk to middle school, and then they would have rides or drive to high school. And that's why I chose where I live. I said, but that's not my point. My point is this. So I'm not getting any traction with the school board for the Littleton Public Schools. So I go to the city of Centennial, and when I originally moved into my neighborhood, I was Littleton, and then Centennial is like this cancerous, creeping, weird city that kind of overtakes neighborhoods as it progresses. But so Centennial, I contact them, and they're like, okay, just to appease you, we'll put one of those, things that monitor speeds, and we'll collect the data on that, and go from there. And I said, okay. So by the time they do that, I get a email from City of Centennial saying, this is our data, and they gave me this huge spreadsheet, and they said this is what our conclusion is, and this does not warrant a flashing school zone. So I'm looking at their data, and they're claiming that the average speed on a 25-mile-an-hour road was 31 miles per hour, which is above the speed limit, but okay. And I'm like, all right. So I'm going through and I'm looking at the data, and I'm seeing some of the data, at certain times in the day, before school or after school. And there's 3 pieces of data before school and 3 pieces of data after school that someone is averaging about 61 to 65 miles per hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. So I point this out to the city, and they're like, well, what do you want us to do? And I said, maybe we should contact the Arapahoe County Sheriff, and they could have, we could see the time this is happening. Maybe a motorcycle unit could come out and run radar and ticket these people who are doing more than twice the speed limit through the neighborhood. And they're like, oh, we don't have enough manpower for it. I'm like thinking, okay, everything that I've corresponded is now part of public records. So if some kid gets hit by a car, those public records for those families, they're going to own the city. And so I go and I look at the data, and I run the data, I plug in all the data, and I'm like, wait a minute. They're claiming the average speed is, 31 miles an hour, and I'm getting an average speed in the 40s. So I sent it back. I said, I just want you to know, I ran the data, and my conclusion shows a much higher average speed than what your city traffic control engineers claim. And so like, well, let us put you in contact. So I get in contact, and I'm getting this email back and forth with the traffic engineer, and he tells me flat out, he goes, how you do statistics. I'm like, oh, here we go. how we do statistics. Okay. I take out all of the top speeds that are way too high, and I don't count them. So I have this email, and I'm like, this person shouldn't have a job. I'm ticked. And so I bring this back to the city managers. I said, this is the email that your traffic engineer tells me. The next day, I see a cement thing getting poured, an electric rent and run, flashing school zone. But my point is, I'm telling you that, is unfortunately, a lot of times people will try and get this kind of shape. And they're going to massage their data in order to get that shape, which means they are cheating the system. They are not being truthful about their information. Okay? In fact, this is what their data would have shown. It would have been skewed to the right because you had very high speeds that are pulling the tail out to the right. Okay? And just by going through that, that was a huge point. Now, there's other things that could happen. You could have data that does look like this. And this is if you have two modes. And of course, you could have 3 humps like that, or 4 humps, or 5 humps, depending upon all the things. Data that you won't necessarily see is you won't see the J shape, and you normally won't see the inverted U shape. The rectangle shape, this takes place when all data is equal. Okay? Meaning I found 10 pieces of data here, 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, so on and so forth. Okay? These types of shapes don't happen too often if you're collecting data the correct way, but they go with it. So we're looking for symmetric distributions. Now, if you don't find it, you are not to eliminate data so you get it. Okay? If you find something that is not symmetric on your data collection, that is okay. It becomes harder and harder to make conclusions based off of it, but it's okay. You should not, if you go and you're going to run data or do a study and run your statistics on the data collection you're going to do, things that you might see could happen. And you don't, again, massage your data to make it fit a curve. Okay, it's cheating. It's not the right way to do it. Okay, so the normal distribution is often called the bell curve. And you've heard bell curve at some point. Okay, if you've ever taken the ACT or the SAT, or if you've ever taken an AP course or anything like that, what they do is they renormalize the test every year and then create a normal distribution based on it. So if you scored a 32 on the ACT, you know, and that's a good score, your 32 on the ACT doesn't mean you got 32 questions correct. It just means that you fell into something that's probably 1 or 2 standard deviations above the average. Okay? But the bell curve is a normal distribution. It forms, you know, if it's truly a normal curve, a nice symmetrical thing where your average and your median are very close to the same number. Okay? That's what you're looking at. And again, it might not always happen. We talked about rectangular distribution, bimodal. You know, if you have multiple modes, you could have that. And then we talked about skewed left, meaning negative skew, and skew right is positive. So basically, all a symmetric distribution would mean is that the mean and the median are, for the most part, the same number. Okay? The more data you collect, the more likely it would be that you would get a normal distribution. So if we were to say, if we were to take every high school throughout the United States, if I wanted to find out, let's do this. Let's find out how many Palms teams we have at every high school USA. You with me? Okay. Or if we wanted to find out how many people are playing football, or playing hockey, or who skateboard, any school USA, what you're going to do is you're going to take all of the high schools throughout the United States. You're going to give some sort of number to every one of those high schools throughout the United States. You don't have to test every high school throughout the United States. But what you're going to do is you take all the high schools throughout the United States, big, large, charter, private, whatever. You're going to give every one of them a number, and it's a different number. It doesn't matter what number you give, but I would say, let's say there's 300,000 different high schools throughout the United States, and I'm just picking an arbitrary number. I have no idea if that's true or not. You don't have to test from all 300,000 high schools. What you do is you're going to randomly assign with a random number generator a certain amount of schools that you're going to pick. You're going to reach out to each one of those schools, and then you're going to have each of those schools, every student's going to have a random number, and it could be their student ID number, and you're going to do a random number generator, and you're going to test a certain amount of students from each of those high schools that you have selected from your random selection. And once you collect that data, you're going to create a normal distribution, and then you can make conclusions based off that. If you chose every student at every high school in the United States, that's something called a census. That means you're testing 100% of your population. Okay? The United States every 10 years will run a census. It's part of the Constitution. Okay? They're trying to find out from 100% of the population what's going on. Okay? And the census could do anything from how many cars you have in your household, how many people live in your home, how large your house is in square footage. All these types of things can be part of the census. Now, a lot of people will say, I'm not going to answer the census, therefore, because it's not any of their business of what is in my home. I get that, but that's what the census is trying to do. So a census is 100% of your population. 100% of your population should give you a really good foundation of what you're trying to aim towards. But a census is pretty darn expensive. Imagine if you were going to do a census of every household, apartment, condo, townhome, motel, homeless population. If you were going to collect all of that data, that is a lot of money and a lot of manpower to do. Okay, it's not a likely thing to take place. Yes, the United States government has an unbelievable amount of money that they're going to run a census to do. But what we can do is we can get very close conclusions based on if we do a random number generator and we are not cutting out data. Okay, and again, the term massaging data, unfortunately, is what is used over and over and over again, and it's horrible to do. Okay, we just all came through this whole COVID thing. Okay, yes, it's still active. Okay, some of us have gotten 1 or 2 vaccines. Some of us gotten 4. Some of us are waiting to get the 5th. Some of us are saying, heck, I'm not going to do it. Okay, we're all over the place, right? And I'm not saying people who aren't getting a vaccine are wrong. I'm not saying people who get a vaccine are wrong either. I'm just saying this is what our population is doing. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people sit there and point fingers. Everyone loves to point fingers at society and say, because of that group of people, this is why this is taking place. And it's like, well, maybe people need to look into the mirror and really realize who they are, because if you're looking in the mirror, that person in the mirror might be part of the problem. Okay. But again, massaging data has been used for so many times. And, I like to rip on the federal government. I like to rip on different groups out there that will massage their data so they can look, quote unquote, superior. And it is wrong to do. And this is where I want you all from this class to realize, okay, this is wrong. I'm reading this. I call nope, nope, nope on this. Now, you might be the only person who's calling nope, 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 and everyone else is following, okay? A lot of times, statistics is so massaged with the data that it's almost gossip. It's not true. So, and the hard thing is when you are right, because you know enough statistics to make you dangerous to say, I'm going to choose doubting this, and everybody else is saying, nope, this is what it is. I mean, we have unfortunately seen it with just our country itself. We have people that are saying, it's got to be this way. You got people saying, it's got to be this way. You got people who are in the middle going, I have no idea what to believe, because they'll hear 2 different stories that are completely opposing, but both sides of those stories that are telling the story think that they're right. Who is really right? And friends, I'm going to tell you this. If you are looking at Well, let's pick on history. Can I pick on Mr. Knockel? If any of you have Knockel, let him know I was ripping on him. Deal? I think Knockel's got one of the hardest jobs as a history teacher that of any teacher. Why? Why would I say that? Yeah. So, and I've never sat in Knockel's class, so I don't know how he teaches. I just know him, and I think he's a wonderful person. I think he's probably a wonderful teacher from what students have said. But the unfortunate thing is, if you find out one portion of history and you don't look at all of the other versions of history, history will repeat itself. Okay? I'll say that again. If you look at one point of view for history and you never look at the other points of history, history will repeat itself. Now, there are some good things at history. If it repeats itself, that's good. There are some things that are absolutely horrific. Okay? What are we trying to base our lives on? I mean, I'm not saying go fight a battle. I mean, if you come to me and say, hey, I feel this is taking place, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. But I'm also going to research my stuff from other points of view. The greatest class I ever took was Arizona history. Okay? Because I grew up in Arizona, I had to take Arizona history in college. You want to know how this Arizona history teacher taught the class? Dr. Morales, one of the most wonderful teachers. His classes were packed every lecture. There was people that would show up to his lectures that weren't taking his class. That's how good his class was. This is how he taught Arizona history. He picked the Chiricahua Apache Indians. That's Geronimo's tribe. And taught Arizona history through the eyes of the Chiricahua Apache Indian. It was so different than when I took Arizona history in high school, saying this is the book. When I had Mr. Colburn in high school, great teacher, one of my football coaches. He was the greatest teacher in the world in the classroom, the biggest jerk in the world as a football coach, but it was what it was. But here in Arizona history, through the perspective of Arizona history being taught through my high school, and then taking Arizona history taught how Dr. Morales wanted it taught through the eyes of the Chiricahua Apache Indians, was amazing. But it wanted me to dig further. I want to find out Arizona history through other groups. I wanted to find out, the Catholic Church, their missionaries came up through Arizona from Mexico. I wanted to find their perspective. That's a lot different perspective than the Native Americans. It's a lot different perspective than what the book in my high school history was. So why did I enjoy that? If you take all of the perspectives on a historical event and you look at that, you can then get a better picture of what was really happening. And I have friends in Arizona that are like, oh, you should only listen to this way. My friend Brandon, love the guy to death. Okay, Brandon's 6'8", he was in the Marines for 8 years. Still can't believe his job in the Marines was this job, but he drove tanks at 6'8". I don't think they build tanks for people who are 6'8". But he'll tell me, Stirrup, you shouldn't be investing in the stock market. Okay. What should I be investing in? You should be investing in gold. Brandon, are you investing in gold? Oh, no. Are you investing in the market? Oh, no, I don't save. Okay, so I'm taking advice from somebody who I have the utmost respect for that doesn't invest in either market, but telling me what I should invest in, because I do invest in the market. Should I change what I'm doing based on what Brandon has said? It's kind of a fool's way. Okay? I mean, I love Brandon. Don't get me wrong. He's one of my brothers. I mean, he's not really a, blood brother, but, Brandon and I have known each other since 1982. Okay? I've known him for a long, long time. So my point on all of this, kind of pulling it back together, is watch out. You're going to see some normal distributions that we're going to start getting into. And yes, we're going to make up fictitious things that go along to fit along with our data. But the normal distribution, watch out for the massaged data of anything, because it's going to take away from what the point is. And a lot of times people will use statistics to get their influence put out there based on what their belief as that individual or that group would be. And that is wrong, in my opinion. Okay? Some people will live by it. This is what we show. This falls right in with who we are. Therefore, that's true. Okay. Really? No. So, I think I've talked enough. You guys want some homework? No. Okay, well, it's not really a choice, but I guess it is a choice. You can choose not to do it, and then what section is this? We are in 1.8. Is that what it was? 1.8. All right. So I would like for you to give me a good attempt at page 117 and page 118. Okay? Save